Thank you very much, Hamantha, for the introduction and for having us and organizing the webinar. I just wanted to check, can people hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Perfect. So yeah, my name's Sam. I'm from Friends of the Earth Australia, based here in Melbourne, in lockdown during COVID, and we've had a recent spike in cases, so we're back in lockdown. I'm not sure how the rest of you are going, but I hope you're doing well at this time. My understanding of my role, I'm giving a bit of an overview and an introduction to the problem in Asia, but also what the Friends of the Earth groups are doing. And I just wanted to start with a very short video that gives, for people who might be new or coming to the webinar for the first time, that just gives a bit of an overview of the plastic waste problem. So I'm just going to share my screen now. And you should be able to hear this video as well. And this was made from some of our allies and friends at the Story of Stuff.
We're back with an alarming new report that came out this past week on the state of the world's oceans.
32% of plastic packaging ends up littering the environment. 40% is sitting in a landfill somewhere. 14% is incinerated. 14% is recycled. But only 2% is effectively recycled.
Downhill from the prison, downhill from the mall, downhill from the factory farm and the hospital.
It's not reasonable at all that we continue to live like this.
Downhill from the border wall, downhill from everywhere. Downhill from all you see. The ocean's downhill from gravity.
About 8 million metric tons go into the ocean every year. That's the equivalent of one city garbage truck dumping a load of plastic into the ocean every minute of every day.
This is the story of plastics. It is fossil fuels finding a new form and finding a new place to flow through the economy.
The surge of attention to plastic pollution is pretty striking.
You think of the ocean as yours. Do you think about it at all?
I believe we're at a tipping point right now. I've seen more policy change globally in the last 8 months than I've seen in 20 years of my career. Because not only are governments getting pissed off, but companies are recognizing they can't get away with it anymore.
I don't think they can keep on tricking people forever.
Okay, just wait 1 second while I start listening. So just I'm just giving you a bit of a general overview of some of the work of Friends of the Earth. I don't think I need to explain.
Plastics are treated as a product that miraculously appears from nowhere and it goes to nowhere. It starts.
We were getting more plastic videos there. 1 second. Just wait, bear with me. Sorry. Cool. Yeah, so thanks for joining us. I'm just going to go through quickly a bit of a broad overview, but as the video highlighted, and I think many on this webinar would be aware, plastics is a major environmental problem. From the production to the disposal, it at all levels of the chain, it's problematic for the environment and for people. And particularly in Asia with growing plastic consumption, but also growing disposal here. And some of the environmental issues were highlighted there, from toxicity in animals to waste pollution in the ocean, to polluting our riverways and our oceans and our cities. So plastic has a myriad of issues, and Hamantha highlighted them, and the video also highlighted them. So I think it's clear to say plastic is one of the key environmental issues of our times, and there's a growing movement across the world to address this. The plastic problem in Asia is growing, and you can see here, this is a town in Indonesia. Some Friends of the Earth people went there and they took some photos, and this is one of the towns that is having plastic pollution from outside, particularly from northern countries, dumped on them through shipping. And this is some backyard plastic production and sorting systems that we see across Asia. So just to give a bit of overview of the key plastic events in the region. So one thing I think that's happening is at the political level is a growing use, consumption and production of plastic across Asia. But with that, there's a real growth in a recognition this is a problem and that governments need to do something about it, and a real movement of people across the region and across the world demanding to break free from plastic. We have a number of, I'm sure people on the call might be aware, but there's the Break Free from Plastic movement, which gathers hundreds and hundreds of civil society organizations. And I might ask someone to post, if they can, the website in the link, or I'll do it after this talk. But they're a really good network, a global network to get involved in for this work on plastics. So yeah, at one hand, at the Asian side, we see growth in consumption, production of plastics, and this problem really rising in the last few decades, but also a real response mainly from people's movements to address it, but also increasingly governments taking some steps in terms of, banning single-use plastics that we see in a number of Asian countries, to the movement for zero waste cities, to circular economy plans. Not very few of them, I would say, at this stage are adequate to address the problem, but we do see a number of positive movements. But really what we're talking for at Friends of the Earth, whether it be the dirty energy system or the dirty food system or the plastic waste system, we really need a system change in plastic use, because plastic is a disposable and harmful product, and rather than just only recycling, we're really about reduction in the first place. So I just wanted to quickly give a bit of overview. I know Magas is going to speak about this later in much more depth, so I'll be very quick. But a key milestone is when China stopped importing plastic waste in 2018 in the region. And you can see a map here, a lot of the waste from the United States and Europe beforehand, and even other Asian countries like Australia, was going to be processed in China for recycling or incineration or disposal. And in 2018, China said, no, we don't want it anymore. So millions and millions of tons have been redirected to other Asian countries. And I think that's been a key event in 2018 that's impacted the global recycling market, but also waste systems around the world. So where I'm from in Australia, we exported a very large percentage of our unrecyclable and recyclable plastic waste, but we were also paid for it. China bought it and they used it as a primary product, but without that money, a lot of the economics behind the waste systems in many parts of the world become uneconomical. So you see, not getting paid for plastic anymore has sent, councils in Australia, a wealthy country, now say we can no longer collect your recycling. So it's been since 2018, I think it's just wanted to highlight, and Magas will talk more about the response, but China stopping accepting being the world's dumping ground has had global impacts on the trade in waste. And just finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the Friends of the Earth groups are doing, campaigning around it. So you'll see down here, there's a photo, it's actually me dressed up in that Coke can, but we at Friends of the Earth Australia organise a number of protests with our waste campaign. We took hundreds of bottles of plastic waste that were no longer being recycled and dumped them on the Parliament steps that got a lot of media. And the campaign in Australia has been somewhat successful in getting, or with other people in the plastics movement, getting a new compost bin. So if we look at the detail of it, we used to only have two sorts of bins, a landfill and a general recycling. We'll now be moving to having glass recycling, but also importantly, a compost bin that takes a lot of the waste stream out of the system. Another thing that Friends of the Earth Australia is doing is we run a small plastic-free shopping centre and cooperative, and that's becoming increasingly popular across Australia to really promote and be part of the solution for a new plastic-free world. And at Friends of the Earth, we see our theory of change, or how change happens, as mobilise, resist and transform. So we need to resist, as we're doing the protesting there, resist the plastic industry and the harmful plastic, but we also need to be proposing solutions, and we do that every day with our plastic-free cooperative shopping centre. Up here you have a photo of from Sri Lanka, and they've used a technique, and maybe our Sri Lankan friends will speak a bit more about it, but of doing brand audits, so going around and collecting waste from the environment and seeing which brands are there and which brands are responsible. So we see that some of the biggest brands in the world making millions of dollars, who are also claiming to be really caring about plastic, have their waste all spread all across our world. So the brand audit has been an interesting technique used by many different groups. In the right here, we see Magas, who's going to talk next. That's her doing some international negotiations around the Basel Convention, and that's to really look at better regulating the trade in waste. But I'm going to let her talk about that. And down here, we have two Friends of the Earth Japan people who've recently just sent a letter to the OECD to do some lobby and advocacy on the Japanese government. So this gives you a bit of an idea of the different activities. Many Friends of the Earth groups across Asia and also across Europe are really leading the way in this fight against plastic, to break free from plastic and to have a sustainable future. So I'll leave it there, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you very much. So bringing this overview about the plastic pollution in Asia and what Friends of the Earth groups are doing around the world to combat this plastic pollution. I'm going to invite now Mageswari Sangaralingam, and she's an environmental activist from Sahabath, Malaysia, also Friends of the Earth Malaysia. So Malaysia is known to Consumer Association of Penang, and Mageswari is connected with that organization. And you remember recently, so there were few loads of plastic waste came to Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Malaysian groups started fighting against these plastic waste and sent some of those containers back to the original country. So let me invite Mageswari to share her knowledge on the conventions to combat plastic pollution. Mageswari.
Hello.
Yes, Magesh.
Yes, good afternoon. Okay, I will be talking a little bit on the International Convention to Control Plastic Waste Trade. And before I do that, I will also show you what is the current plastic waste trade. Okay, when China closed its doors in 2018, it was not importing any more plastic waste. Malaysia became the newest hub for plastic waste trade. And if you can see, the main exporters were Germany, Japan, USA, and UK. And Malaysia received the most plastic waste imports. And other Asian countries actually had maybe half of the imports. Yeah. And what was it done? So we also had a lot of waste from the UK and US. You can see from these figures. Again, Malaysia is the top recipient of this plastic waste. And Turkey comes next, Indonesia. And in Indonesia, it's not only traded as plastic waste. The plastic also is contaminating paper waste. So when they open up the paper bales, you can see a lot of plastic also in the consignments. Yeah. From US, again, Malaysia is the top importer. And also part of it goes to Canada. But then in terms of transshipment, there would be transshipment. And if you can see, Hong Kong also has quite a high trade in plastic waste imports, but this is also because it's a transshipment. So from Hong Kong, it is probably sent to Malaysia or other Southeast Asian countries. Yeah, and so if you can look at this, this was done by Plastic Pollution Coalition. You can see the trends in terms of the countries where they say it's waste which is mismanaged. Bangladesh has also seen a increase in plastic waste imports. Malaysia had seen a little bit, it's a little lower, but then there was still an increase. Yeah, and a lot of countries also found a decrease in the imports due to restrictions imposed by the countries. So why did the countries impose restrictions? You see, in 2018, Malaysia was bringing in a lot of plastic waste, but then we did not have the capacity. The recycling factories did not have the capacity to treat or recycle all the waste that came in. And also another problem was the waste that came in were mixed waste. So some of these waste plastics cannot be recycled. So it ended up as residual waste. And what happened to the residual waste? It was just dumped in landfills, and this contaminated our soil and waterways. And also some of these residual waste were burnt, because if the company wants to do it properly, that will be costing a lot of money. Yeah, and also informal recycling also started coming in. And you can see here, there's electronic waste which was being separated by the women. So they separate the precious metals out, the plastics, ABS out for recycling. Yeah, and in this way, the company is not going to take care of the health of the workers. Yeah, they're exposed to all these toxic emissions. Okay, so the impacts were public and workers' health and safety were impacted, and environmental pollution. We saw air, soil, waterways, our crops and livestock were also impaired. And Greenpeace Malaysia had come out with a study with the Greenpeace Germany, and in terms of the contaminants in our soil and water. And this is also an environmental injustice, because we are being used as a dump site by developed countries, and who is going to take care of the cleaning up, the cost of cleaning up. So as Hemanta had mentioned, the Malaysian government and also other governments, Sri Lankan government, they had taken measures to send back the waste which was brought in, and some of these waste were brought in through false declaration in the import bills, and also and it was mixed plastics. Yeah, so if it's like just one type of plastics, it's easy for it to go into a factory to be recycled. But when it's mixed plastics, then you will have to separate them. And also if it's dirty plastics, you will have to clean it. So this is also burdening our waterways, with the pollution. And so there were also a lot of illegal plastic waste recycling factories that had come out in 2018. Some of it were owned by the Chinese from China. And so the government also had a lot of raids. And since all these problems were happening, as Sam had mentioned, a few groups, Basel Action Network, Break Free from Plastic, Friends of the Earth International, and a few other local groups like Ecoton in Indonesia, we started lobbying at the Basel Convention in Geneva, and within a few weeks we had over 600,000 signatures which were submitted to the Basel Convention COP chairman. Yeah? And you can see all this lobbying happening. So what is the Basel Convention? The Basel Convention is a convention to control transboundary movement of hazardous waste. And most of our countries are party to Basel Convention, except for US. Yeah? So Basel Convention was adopted in 1989. So it limits the trade of hazardous waste. So why is this Basel Convention important in terms of plastic waste? So in 2019, the Norwegian government proposed that plastic waste is included in the Basel Convention. So the outcome at the Basel COP14, certain plastic waste were added to the Basel Convention, and it also requires exporters to obtain the consent of receiving countries. For instance, let's say China or US wants to send waste to an OECD country, they will have to declare whether if the waste is contaminated or mixed or unrecyclable, they will have to get the consent from Malaysia or Sri Lanka before they can send the waste. So this is an important tool for countries to stop the dumping of unwanted plastic waste into their country. And so the new entries will come into effect from 1st of January 2021. So our countries have just a few more months to get all this the laws transposed into our own laws. So the amendments, it entered into force on 24th of March. So most of the countries have already accepted it, except for Canada, China, and Turkey. Canada is asking for more time so that they can comply with the treaty. Yes. So if you would like to get more information, you can look at the text of the plastic waste amendments in this websites and status of ratification. Okay, so we need to ask, is this the solution? plastic waste trade? Are we going to control it? If we continue to bring in more waste, isn't it dumping of waste? So do we still bring in the waste, control it, or should we end all waste trade to curb the dumping? And if there is a control also, can our government strictly enforce the restrictions? Yeah, and are our borders or customs control very effective? Are they going to check all the consignments of plastic waste that is coming in? So if they miss out, what happens to those plastic waste? Are they going to check what waste is coming in and where it's going and what ends up as residual waste? And also there is an issue of, if it's post-consumer plastic waste, there's an issue of contamination. So what are the limits of contamination the government is looking into? So, and this is also another thing, because of all this waste that is coming in, there's also a lot of false solutions for plastic, to treat plastic waste. So one of it is incineration. Yeah, as we all know, we are against incineration. And some of this plastic waste and residual waste goes into cement plants. All this will also emit toxic emissions, toxic emissions, and it will also impact the health of communities. And there's also a lot of countries who's going into plastics to fuel. They say it's waste to energy or make plastics into roads. So these are all false solutions, and it perpetuates the continued production of plastics. So what we feel the solution is, we need upstream measures to address the production of plastics and also in terms of consumption of plastics. Later on, our colleagues from FOE, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka will be discussing about the measures taken by their own countries to curb the plastic production and consumption. Okay, so thank you. That's all from me for now. You can look at the links that I had shared for more resources on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mageswari.